We're back, and it's that most wonderful time of the year. Football back in the air. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast as we start to get into the full swing of things.
And I'm Andy Young, and contrary to popular belief, both of us still work here.
Right. Hey, got to get some vacation time in before this Bills season gets underway.
That's right. And before we dive into this, I'm looking at our laptops here if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook. What is the acceptable number of tabs you're allowed to have open on your browser? Because you have one.
I have one.
I've got to have 40 here.
Usually this screen is just blank. It's just open because you have your laptop open. When John used to do it, he would have his laptop open, and I would just sit here with my little piece of paper and a pen to jot down notes. But I'm trying to get up to speed with all this technology stuff going around. I think it makes it easier when you have the internet up to double check things before you say something wrong. But of course, I'm a one-tab guy. I like to keep it clean.
Only took you 51 years to figure that out, right?
That's right, Andy.
I like to have a bunch of tabs open, but it does get overwhelming because now I have multiples of many of them, and I don't know which one's which.
So you'll have Twitter up. You'll have other stuff up, which I'll have on my phone. But then again, you're the technology guy. You're the guy who has followers on Twitter. I do not.
So, we're working on that on both accounts.
Yeah, we'll keep working on it. But it is like, Andy, I look forward to this time of year ever since I was a little kid. Like the preseason football games when I was a kid, I get excited about. Training camp, when I got older and started playing football, we didn't have double sessions or anything till the end of August, but we would have captain's practices where you would go meet up with everyone on the team, run pass routes, whatever you want to say.
Depends on which part of the country you're from.
Yeah, I guess so. But just, you still have that. There are days in the summer that you'll still get to enjoy with your family, go out on the lake or do whatever you do with your family time. But now it gets into full swing with training camp starting at St. John Fisher in just a couple of days. So many storylines going on with this Buffalo Bills team right now that we kind of whittled it down for this episode, that we're going to focus on what we, like many others, view as the biggest thing to look at when it comes to the Bills at training camp.
The punter competition.
Punt returner, I said.
No, we are going to dive into the wide receiver position because it's what everyone's been talking about all offseason, even prior to the Stephon Diggs trade. Right?
You want to know what really grinds my gears about the Stephon Diggs trade?
Yes, Peter Griffin.
I was with a bunch of people in Connecticut. There was this party going on. This kid must have been about 12 years old. Someone told him that I cover the Bills for a living. Starts drilling me about the Bills trading Stephon Diggs. And I left that party and I said, kid, trust me when I tell you this. Stephon Diggs ain't going nowhere.
Wrong.
I was back during my vacation. This kid and his dad just sitting there. I could tell they were waiting for me to arrive to jump down my throat about them being right, me being wrong about Stephon Diggs getting traded. And that's what really annoys me about the Stephon Diggs trade. Made me look bad. It's always about me.
This is a chance for me to just eviscerate you, and I'm not going to do it.
Come on.
I mean, I'm with you, dude. Like, didn't expect the Stephon Diggs trade given the cap ramifications and all that sort of stuff. But that totally set the stage for a very interesting offseason for the Bills as they've kind of reset themselves while trying to stay in a competitive window, kind of the next iteration of the Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane era. We saw them kind of push all the chips to the table when they went all in with Von Miller and kicking some of the extension money down the road. Now they're kind of reaping what they sowed there. And they decided to eat that Stephon Diggs money, get a little younger, kind of reshape the roster. And here we are now with a vastly different group of wide receivers for one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL We'll get to that, I think, in a little bit.
Not according to someone who talked to ESPN.
Right. So this is really an intriguing time for the Buffalo Bills because can they remain competitive in that Super Bowl window with the caliber of wide receivers they have, and how they'll mix that all together with Allen, with James Cook, with Joe Brady's new spin on the offense, with Dalton Kincaid. I'm really excited to see how this all shakes out. I think it's a little less intriguing as far as like who is going to make the roster,
right?
But more in terms of like how they'll be impactful once the season starts.
Yeah, and I think this is the next step in the whole Josh Allen growth process. Is you brought Stephon Diggs here to help Allen get to a certain level and get to where he needs to be, and now we're bringing in these other pieces. There is no stud number one wide receiver. Now it's up to Josh Allen to elevate the wide receivers around him and make his team better. So while we're going to focus on the different wide receivers that were brought in, a lot of this is going to end up on Josh Allen and what he can do with what management has put on this roster for him.
Yeah, so like when you look at the wide receiver group, Khalil Shakir is the only Bills wide receiver who's caught a pass from Josh Allen during the regular season. And he's only a second-year guy. And Shakir, for all the talk about him making a drastic leap this season and becoming a big-time target for Josh Allen, it's all about potential. It's not proven.
Right.
Like, he had a decent season last year, but he only had 39 catches, right?
Uh-huh.
2 touchdowns, 611 yards. Now, granted, here's the cool part with Shakir. He had 45 targets. He caught 39 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So when the ball goes his way, when Allen looked his direction last season, odds are he's making the catch, and odds are it was a big play.
When you brought that up to me, because the two big plays stand out when it comes to Shakir, right? The touchdown on Monday Night Football, I think it was against the Buccaneers or the Giants. I can't remember which one, but he took it to the house. And then the one in the playoffs where he got decked and everyone thought he was down and he kept motoring his way into the end zone, Andy. And I think that's the jumping off point for me was while he didn't have as many catches as I thought, the ones that he did have came at big times, came when the Bills really needed a spark or something. And I think with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis now gone, and you have what you think you have in Shakir on a regular basis, I think that you should be in a pretty comfortable spot going into the season, at least having him and his familiarity with Josh Allen.
And I think, too, like, he's going to settle more into that slot role.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could do other things. I think he has some ability as an outside wide receiver, too. But he really kind of settled into that Cole Beasley. Now, they're completely different types of players, Beasley and Shakir. But he settled into that spot where Allen was looking his way as sort of a security blanket, a guy that he could rely on to make catches. I mean, last season we saw a whole lot of drops from a lot of different guys, even Stephon Diggs included.
Mm-hmm.
And they started the season kind of playing around with Deontay Hardy in the slot and with Sherfield and moving Diggs into that area quite a bit.
This time last year, Andy, when we were getting ready for Bills camp, a lot of people had Khalil Shakir as a bubble player to even make the roster.
Exactly.
Now, going into this season, he's the one lock you really have as a player that's going to be there and someone Josh Allen is going to be able to rely on. And, he did get banged up during minicamp as well, from what I recall.
Yeah, he did. I think he'll be okay. It didn't seem like anything too serious. So, we'll see as we're recording this here on a Monday leading into training camp Wednesday if he's out on the field and good to go. I mean, that'll be something to keep an eye on. But I wouldn't expect any sort of long-term ramifications. It's interesting to kind of pontificate and predict and look at, like, Davis and Diggs leave. That's like 240 targets.
Right.
Gone, right? They've got to get spread somewhere. yeah, maybe they run the ball a little more, that sort of thing, but they're still going to throw the ball. You got Josh Allen. I mean, you're not packing it in and going, 3 yards in a cloud of dust here, right? So, what's a reasonable expectation in jumps for a guy like Shakir? 39 receptions last year, 45 targets. Does he get to 80 targets, 100 targets? I mean, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all shakes out in the hierarchy of how these guys are used in the offense. Does somebody end up jumping up to being a guy who has a ton of targets in the offense? I don't know. Or does Joe Brady and Josh Allen say, look, we're just going to kind of chip around, spread it around to different guys, whoever's open, whoever kind of fits the game plan that week? Or does somebody become that reliable de facto number one? Yeah, maybe they aren't Stephon Diggs, but still they're by and far the leader in targets.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Kincaid too, because I think he's got a really good chance to lead this team in that regard. But as far as the wide receivers go, is it going to be Shakir or maybe somebody else like Curtis Samuel?
Curtis Samuel getting a lot of buzz when the Bills picked him up throughout minicamp and organized team activities. Unfortunately, I was not out there for most of it. You were out there for all of it. Is he really that buzzworthy as far as – because, I mean, and of course it's the Washington Commanders, which you rarely are you sitting around checking Washington Commanders highlights. So my initial reaction was, is this a big deal that the Bills got this guy, Andy, and is he one of those guys that are, in fact, a shoo-in that's going to be in the rotation here?
He absolutely will be a shoo-in. I think he's a starter.
Yeah.
I don't see any problem there. I think he might be used in a variety of different ways. I mean, he's a former running back in college at Ohio State. Has played wide receiver, but also has that ability to do some gadget stuff. He also has some real downfield ability. I don't think that's been utilized a whole lot throughout his career, but you also have to kind of keep in mind the quarterbacks he's had with Carolina and with Washington. His best season came in 2020 when Joe Brady was his offensive coordinator with the Panthers.
Interesting.
That season he had 77 catches, 851 yards. His career high in touchdowns is 7 if you include rushing touchdowns too, because he does have several of those throughout his career. So I think he's a candidate with a different type of quarterback in Josh Allen, who's really, really good. Maybe he's a guy who can lead this team in targets. I think he's going to serve a really important role for this team, and a guy that can be utilized in a whole host of ways, whether that's you put him in the backfield and then run him out on routes to get him on linebackers or to get him on nickel corners, all those sorts of things. He can play in the slot. He's a guy that's got some speed to get over the top, and he's a run after, yard after, rack, yak kind of player too.
Which the team was so lacking over the last –
We've been talking about this for like 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean – Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, yeah, they had their moments, but neither one of them really did anything after they got the ball in their hands.
Cole Beasley never really did when he was here.
Right.
John Brown did a little, but most of his was through the air deeper.
Yeah.
So is this a shift in the Bills' offense a little bit in the way they want to attack? Do they have some of the big, tall, downfield guys? We'll talk about some of those. And then they have some fast, quick underneath guys like Samuel and Shakir, right, that can do some of the work underneath and in the intermediate areas. I think Curtis Samuel's a really nice player. Is he a star in the NFL? No, but he's been a good player in the league, a decent player, and with a coordinator who knows him and has utilized his skills in the past, and with Josh Allen, I think he could have a bigger year. Do I expect him to be, a first-team All-Pro?
Right.
I don't think so, but he could be in a really important piece and a good player in a good Bills offense if they do the right things with him.
Now you got me all juiced up knowing that Joe Brady is – I guess I should have known that.
We're going to be a little optimistic today, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
We have plenty of time to, say how terrible players and teams are.
And I'm big into this theory of sometimes you have to move on from a star player to get the right team together that you need to win a championship. And I'm still very much in that mode that it goes against what a lot of people are saying, that I think the Bills could be better offensively without one guy needing all those targets.
I understand that sentiment, and part of me agrees with that. Like, hey, we're going to get the ball to a host of playmakers. But, like, who is the guy that you rely on, right, to make a
Dalton
big play?
Kincaid will eventually be that guy.
Right. Like, is he going to have Diggs' number of targets? Is he going to have 160 targets?
I don't think anyone gets up in numbers
right.
like that.
But, like, you look at most of the teams, we'll take the Chiefs out of it because they're operating a little differently right now. But everybody's loading up on wide receiver. Like they're having two number ones in essence, right? You look at the Dolphins. You look at the Eagles, different teams, the Bengals, right? They have multiple, like, 1A and 1B guys. I don't think the Bills right now even have two number two. I don't know if they do. They might prove themselves, but like, going into the season, I don't think they have two number two wide receivers. So it's really interesting as, like, philosophically if that'll work. I was always a huge Stephon Diggs fan, like, as far as, like, the type of player he was. Yeah, the stuff behind the scenes, we'll never know exactly what happened there, but, like, that guy was a really, really, really good player. Like,
oh yeah,
maybe, one of the top 5 in the league for the entire time he was here. Did he slow down in the second halves of seasons the last couple of years? Yes, for some reason. And for whatever reason, whether it was double teams or him or the offense, they didn't look his way a ton in the playoffs. So I never really understood that. But, like, that guy is a big reason why Josh Allen developed into the guy he is. Like
100%, but now it's up to Josh Allen himself to
right.
take his game to the next level. My one tab I have open on this, Andy, is ESPN already has a depth chart out before training camp.
Who put that together? Was that you, Elena Getzenberg?
And I'm just curious. They have, at least now, Keon Coleman as one of the starting 3 wide receivers. Bill's first pick of the draft in the second round. Personality to beat the band through the roof. Looking the part to you as a bona fide possible star in the NFL, or at least one of the, if we go off of like a top 10 list, you think Keon Coleman has it in him to be one of the top 10 rookies in the league this year and to slowly become that 1A wide receiver that the Bills are hoping they found with him?
It's interesting with him because I waxed and waned throughout the process with Keon Coleman. Like, you go back and watch him in the college football season, especially towards the beginning of the season. I mean, that guy was a monster at Florida State. And then you go through the draft process and people are like, oh, he's not that fast. He's a one-trick pony, all those sorts of things. Does he have the separation ability? Is he athletic enough to be that kind of player? And then he kind of slides a little bit in people's minds. And then you get closer to the draft, and then he starts to creep back up a little bit in people's minds. Like, hey, this guy's just kind of a playmaker. He's not a burner by any means, but he's going to do what he needs to do to get open.
He's another guy who gets yards after catch as well.
He does, and he's a different kind of yards after catch guy because he's just so big.
Right. He's
really big, and I think his speed or lack thereof maybe gets a little overblown or underplayed, depending on which way you're looking at the glass half empty or full, because, like Brandon Beane said after the draft, we clocked him. His play speed is faster than what he ran at the combine or at his pro day. And Beane said, we're going to count on this guy in that X receiver role pretty much right away. Then you're going to see what, like, Matt Collins does and Claypool and all these different guys. Do they use those guys as blockers more? Is that something that Coleman is going to be good at? We'll see. Because Gabe Davis was on the field like 90% of the time for the Bills, like way more than anybody else, including Diggs, because he was so good in the running game and also a threat down the field. I think Coleman has the ability to be a very, very good receiver. Do I think he's going to be like CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, even like Marvin Harrison of his same draft class? I doubt it. but he still could be
Worthy
really
made
good.
a great catch.
I
out
saw
of
that.
Chiefs.
And now the internet, good, right? I mean, if Xavier Worthy blows up and Keon Coleman's just adequate or average or like isn't on the field a ton or like, he's getting, 40 catches for 800 yards a year and 4 touchdowns, and Xavier Worthy is lighting it up for Patrick Mahomes.
I'm just saying
that'll be the end of the Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, right? Pitchforks headed to One Bills Drive.
Scrolling through the internet right before we came on, I saw that, and I'm like, that's just what you need out here. That's all it takes is the Chiefs to post one great catch by this guy to get Bills fans all over Keon Coleman right off the start.
I mean, nobody's talking about the yellow coat anymore or the cookies.
Right.
He's got to prove it on the field. I think he's a guy who, from all you hear and you hear from his former coaches and from scouts and things like that, that he's willing to put in the work and do the right things to try to improve and get where he needs to be. Do I think he's going to be an absolute star right away? Probably not, but I think he's going to be a serviceable player, and he's going to be part of this team right away in that mix of the top 3-4 receivers.
You mentioned Chase Claypool, Andy. He's one of the guys that the Bills brought in that kind of has that he needs to prove it a bit. When he arrived on the team, we talked about him going into the workouts during the spring, but it looks like he had a pretty decent spring with the Bills as we head into camp right now, and maybe more positive vibes surrounding Claypool as we head into training camp.
At the very least, through the spring, he said the right things. That, look, I realize where I am in my career, and I'm not where I want to be, and I'm not where people expected me to be, especially the way he blew up his rookie season in Pittsburgh in 2020. I mean, he was a revelation.
Right. And that's the guy I remember.
Right. But then the next year, his second season was and then the last 2 years have been horrible. Like he's done almost nothing, right, offensively between Chicago. He got traded from Pittsburgh to Chicago midseason, and then he gets bumped from Chicago to Miami, and the guy's relegated to special teams. And he admitted that, look, I had to kind of look myself in the mirror and say, why am I doing this? Why am I in – I'm not a special teams player, right? And then he said he actually learned to embrace that. And on this team with the Bills, if he's going to make the team, he's probably going to have to play special teams and really embrace that. I did see some flashes from him during minicamp and OTAs. I saw some times too where I think I posted a video and people kind of criticized it where he didn't leg out a route, like he ran his route, then he kind of just jogged afterwards, and you could hear a coach in the background like, run it all the way out. And then I didn't even realize it when I posted it to X, Twitter, and then people blew up in the comments like, oh, see, he's already not doing what he's supposed to be doing, right? That could have just been a one-off.
Something to keep an eye on at training camp.
Oh, for sure, because that's been a knock on him. He just hasn't done the right things on the field or in the meeting rooms or whatever to make himself a viable player. I've come around on him, though, throughout the spring and now into the summer as we get to training camp. I kind of think he's going to make the roster. He just has that skill and ability and size and speed. It's just, can he consistently put it together?
If you can get the guy who was with Pittsburgh early out there, that can only help with this committee of wide receivers that they're going to be rolling out there. The other big name, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, now a Bill, no longer a Chief. Maybe get a bit of mojo from MVS, as they say, who had a heck of a catch against the Bills in the playoffs.
Yeah, great catch against the Bills, touchdown in the Super Bowl. Like, he's a guy who's kind of stepped up in big games.
Yeah.
But he's just kind of like, he's never been a star player, right? His best season was 2020 when he had Aaron Rodgers. But for his career, he only really catches like 50% of the passes that get thrown his way.
Right.
That's complete opposite of what we were talking about with Shakir earlier, where he caught like almost everything. He's a guy that's basically throughout his career just been a downfield speed deep threat. You need that if you're the Bills.
Oh, yeah. And it matches with what kind of we're talking about here with excuse me, Samuel and Shakir in the slot and getting some of these bigger, faster, downfield kind of wide receivers in the mix, so you have a little bit of everything.
He's a guy, too, I think probably makes the team. So we haven't talked about Mac Hollins yet because I think he's a lock. But to me, MVS makes the team, too, just given that he has playoff experience, that he's been with good quarterbacks in the past. He's just a guy you're not going to go out there and expect a bunch of, like, 8-9 receptions for 130 yards and a touchdown kind of days. He's a guy that every few games might pop off for a touchdown deep and might get 2 or 3 catches a game at best.
Roll for him on the roster, I think. I think he makes the roster.
Right. I think he probably does, just given that they signed him to a contract that has some monetary value. It's not huge. And he's got some skill that they need at that position.
Yeah, you mentioned Mac Hollins. Talked with
one of my favorites. I did a nice feature on him. He's just a cool dude.
Talked to Stevie Johnson a week ago on the podcast here. He's going to be joining us for our Buffalo End Zone postgame show.
Love that.
Throughout the season. Great having Stevie on our team right now. But he was the first wide receiver Stevie brought up too, Mac Hollins.
Mm-hmm.
And my comment to him was, your average football fan probably has no clue who Mac Hollins is. You know who MVS is. You know Chase Claypool. You've seen them. I think when it comes to Mac Hollins, like, people who aren't at workouts and practices and aren't in the loop deep into the NFL might have questions going into training camp. Who's this Mac Hollins everyone's so high on right now with training camp getting underway?
Mac Hollins, guy who has made his bones in the NFL as a special teams player. He's been a special teams captain at multiple stops from college through the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
You know that Sean McDermott, Matthew Smiley, even Brandon Beane through that extended process, value special teams. I think he's a lock. I think he does offer a little bit of something in the offense.
Okay.
He hasn't put a ton together in his career. He's 30 years old. His best year was 2022 with Vegas when he had 57 catches, 690 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, last year with the Falcons in Atlanta, Hollins only 18 catches, 251 yards. So he doesn't offer a ton in his career offensively, but I think he's a guy who's a positive influence, kind of marches to the beat of his own drum in terms of, like, things away from the field. He doesn't wear shoes.
That's right.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. He owns a bunch of reptiles and
okay.
Doesn't eat with utensils, he told me.
That's fair.
This all has to do with football. But I think he's shown leadership ability throughout his career, and I think that he's been a guy that's been talked about among the Bills, Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, as a guy who they see a role for here. Is he going to star on offense? No, I don't think so. But he's going to play some special teams, and he's going to be a guy who has a little bit of a role as a big, tall wide receiver, which they have a bunch of on offense. So that gets us to 6 right there.
Are you inside my brain?
I hope not.
I was just going to say, here we are at 6 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receivers that I think you and I are in agreement on make the roster. How many wide receivers do we think the Bills will carry? And out of who's left in this group, there's still maybe 6 more or so wide receivers fighting for spots on this roster. Players that
I mean, I don't think they're going to keep it would shock me if they kept 7. There's a possibility there, especially given, like, the new kickoff rules. How is that going to affect things? The return game obviously matters. Like, how much are they going to want to use Shakir as, like, a kickoff return guy or a punt return guy if he's a starter on offense in the slot? Right? So then you're talking about, okay, Claypool. I don't think Claypool's a given. I don't think it's a given by any means. Then you're looking at KJ Hamler. He's another guy I sat down and did a feature with during the spring who's got a lot to prove. Former second-round pick of the Broncos, has been injured a ton throughout his career, never really been able to put it together, and even questioned through some life things that went on off the field, whether he even wanted to live at certain points, and very open about his mental health, but feels he's got a fresh start here in Buffalo and really likes that. I mean, that's a guy he's small, but he's got a ton of speed. He could play in the return game. He could play one of your downfield threats or your rack threats. He's a guy that, like Claypool, just has a ton to prove. A little bit younger, has not really put it all together for his career. I think he's among the most talented there. Then you're talking about, Justin Shorter, one of those big, tall, 6'4", 220-pound receivers who basically redshirted last season as a rookie, was injured, spent the whole season on IR. Is he somebody that breaks out in camp and they're like, man, we got to get this guy on our team? We can't afford to send him back down to the practice squad. We saw Andy Isabella a little bit last season. He's another, guy they took a flyer on, a former high second-round pick.
Yep.
Ton of speed, smaller in stature again, like a Hamler, different players, but very, very fast. We saw him get a little bit of action last season, but didn't really show anything. Has ability in the return game. And then you're talking about like Tyrell Shavers, and there's a few other guys. So they're kind of battling to me. I would say MVS to me is probably a lock. Holland's a lock. Coleman, Shakir, Samuel. So you're 5 right there.
Yeah.
Then it's among Claypool, Hamler, Shorter, Isabella, Shavers, probably there, battling for like 1 spot. 2, if they do something different than they've done before, keeping 7 receivers. So it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, and that's why we brought this up is this could go so many like I don't see Claypool and MVS both on this roster.
Really? I thought we were there with 6 with him.
I just changed my mind.
Okay.
I do this all
You're
the
allowed
time.
to do that.
Yeah.
We're talking it out here.
I don't know, maybe I go back and forth on this. Just because I never.
So if Claypool does, or if MVS doesn't make it, you said MVS is not a lock?
I don't see both Claypool and MVS on there. I see one or the other on this opening day roster.
Okay.
And
so
I'm interested to see, because you've had the luxury of being out at mini camp and organized team activities. I'll actually be out there able to keep an eye on this stuff. And like everyone does, the passing game during practice, unless they're fully padded and are hitting, is really the only thing interesting to watch during training camp.
Yeah, or like injured guys, like last year. Like what's Von Miller doing, right? Or like Matt Milano, but like
running backs
stuff.
Going through cones, linemen just touching each other.
Right.
That came out wrong, but
there's a lot of that.
Right. A lot of linemen touching each other at Bill's camp.
Oh boy, this is like feels like week 1 for us because we haven't done this in a month and we're going off the rails already.
So let's talk about Dalton Kincaid then, Andy. If we look as far as pass catchers go, real quick, I think full agreement that Dalton Kincaid, now that Stephon Diggs is gone, is part of the core of what we're going to see from this offense.
I've said this many times. I said it in a preview article for training camp that we've done a series of the Bills' biggest questions going to camp. Digital articles on SpectrumLocalNews.com. If you go to the website, they're all there. Looking at Kincaid, I think he has a really strong chance to lead this team in targets and potentially catches. And he's not Travis Kelce. Let's not go there.
We don't need to.
But be the Bills' top option. It's different than what a lot of people want to see. Most people say, like we talked about earlier, give me A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Give me Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
Yep.
Give me Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and OBJ.
Oh, I forgot that.
Right. But if the Bills are kind of doing things a little differently and they're doing wide receiver by committee and you don't have a star there, can Kincaid become that star? Sure. I think they're going to. I think they're going to look his way a whole lot. And for him to be up near 100 catches is not out of the realm of possibility at all. They got a whole lot of targets to go around. You saw Josh Allen start to look his way a little bit more as the season went on in his rookie year. The depth of target went downfield further for Kincaid. He made bigger plays. He made short stuff. He's a guy that's just a really well-rounded target at tight end, but he's not an inline blocking tight end like they kind of used Knox for last season. So I think if he's playing some of that offset tight end slot type of player role, why not? Why can't he be in that vein? I think there's a good chance between him, Shakir, and Samuel, one of those guys is going to lead in targets, and I think there's a chance that it's Kincaid.
Okay, and this all hinges on the performance of Josh Allen. While you were on vacation, I was semi on vacation. Allen, always a hot button topic. ESPN talked to coaches, scouts, executives around the NFL, did their top 10 list for each position. Something I kept an eye on doing the morning shows here because it's something to talk about. You give someone a list, you could talk about it forever. Allen coming in at number 3, and one executive saying that he's overrated. And that kind of sparked the whole topic of, is Josh Allen overrated? I think that's ludicrous. I don't know what executive said it. You're never going to find out, but the order has to go Mahomes, Allen, Joe Burrow ahead of Allen on this list, and I just don't get it. Like, especially with what happened with Burrow last year. Going into this season, yeah, Burrow took his team to the Super Bowl a few years ago. Allen hasn't done that. That's one of the big knocks on him. But is he overrated?
I almost think he's underrated.
Yeah.
Like, there's a couple different years where he probably should have been the MVP and wasn't considered. Last season, I think he was probably the MVP if the Bills' record had been a little bit better and if, like, he didn't have the blow-up week 1 on Monday Night Football.
Right.
Like, he showed a couple of times he had a couple of bad games. But, I mean, you look at Josh Allen throughout his NFL career. A lot of people like to say, all right, we're going to look at most turnovers, most touchdowns, whatever, since 2020. I went back and looked since 2018. Let's be fair, his first year in the league. Josh Allen has the second most touchdowns in the NFL since 2018. He's right behind Patrick Mahomes. And that combines rushing, passing,
which
receiving.
Slots
which
in
Josh
my
has.
mind right that Josh Allen's number 2.
He also does lead the NFL in turnovers in that time. He does. But people didn't say, like, did people say Brett Favre was overrated?
Right.
Did people say, like, Peyton Manning was overrated? No.
When you're
your team didn't get over the hump. If Patrick Mahomes isn't there, the Bills probably have gone to a Super Bowl or 2.
Right.
And who knows if they won one or not, but, right? Like, you're talking 2 epic playoff games that the Chiefs ended up beating the Bills. Last season's was a great game and ended with the missed field goal. And then, obviously, 13 seconds was probably the best playoff game we've ever seen.
Right.
So, you can't guarantee that they're going to get, one of them they were both in the divisional round, and then they lost to the Chiefs in the championship game. I don't think Allen is in any way overrated. That guy is basically the reason the Bills have been as good as they are. Like, he puts them on his back constantly. What player combines the rushing touchdowns and the scoring? Like, what player is their team more relied upon than Josh Allen? It's crazy to think that he's overrated. Is he perfect? No. And he would be the first to tell you, I need to cut back on a couple of those interceptions or a couple of fumbles. But he's trying to make plays. I don't think he makes too many mistakes. Like, he's the reason. Like, the Bills' record is basically the second best in the NFL since, like, 2019, 2020, behind the Chiefs.
Can I go as far as to say that Allen means more to the Bills than Mahomes does to the Chiefs? Because you're right. There are games where we need a play. We need something. Allen's just going to run the ball then. Because we know if he runs and takes off with the ball, good things can happen. Or we need a big-time throw, and Allen delivers. But I think more of the running when you say puts the team on his back often. I mean, that's the case. And it's not like the Eagles with the little push at the 1 and in. It's Allen 50-yard run against the Steelers.
Right.
Or,
yeah,
when push comes to shove against the Chiefs in the playoffs and they needed points, it was Allen who willed a ball into the end zone, basically.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, because I think Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. He also has the benefit of Andy Reid, who's maybe the best offensive play caller we've ever seen and a great head coach, which has turned out to be true. He had Tyreek Hill as a youngster and did really well with him. And obviously Travis Kelce's probably the greatest tight end we've ever seen.
Rob Gronkowski, but go on.
Go on. So I'm not going to say that he's more important to their team, because they haven't the last couple of years had standout receivers at all.
That's true.
But Mahomes just kind of always makes the big play when he needs it, where Allen hasn't every time done it, but he's pretty damn close. And so to me, if you want to argue like Burrow or whatever, or Lamar, I don't care. What does that really matter?
Right.
He's in the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks, Josh. But he's not overrated. Like, who's better? Who's among down the line is better than him? Dak, Justin Herbert,
right?
C.J. Stroud was great last year, but
Tua?
we'll see. No, Tua. Tua's very good. He's surprised me, but he's not like an elite talent traits player. Josh is maybe the best quarterback we've ever seen in terms of like the physical traits and what he's been able to put on the field so far. I'm not saying like results wise or like he's not in that echelon. He hasn't won a Super Bowl or anything like that, which wins are not a QB stat, but we do measure greatness on team success too.
Yeah.
Have you elevated your team to team success? That matters too. But he's not overrated. Like, he's right where he should be in the top 2, 3, 4 at worst.
Yeah, I and that's why I brought it up. I mean, you and I haven't had a
super
chance
interesting.
to talk.
Yeah.
That in who's the unnamed personnel guy who said he's overrated? Brandon Beane.
Well, I saw
trying to get under Josh's skin.
Well, no,
before training camp starts.
I think it was Craig Carton.
Okay.
Had this theory that he's greasing the skids to then trade Josh Allen.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, I think it was him, and I'm sorry if I put that on you and it's not true. They're not trading Josh Allen.
Right. Well I
did
said that about Stephon Diggs.
I know you did, and then some 12-year-old threw it in your face.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, that 12-year-old. All right, Andy, before we go, a little 3 and out. We were both on vacation for about the last 2 months between the two of us.
Come on, give us some credit. We worked in June.
Yeah. Well, and then I took like 3 weeks off after that. Did you do anything? I didn't really do much. I did a lot of traveling. Went and played some golf up in the White Mountains and in New Hampshire a few times. And that's really basically it between work and my wife having to work and stuff like that. We did most of the time was just I would just hang out in the backyard and grill and
yeah. I was pretty busy. My sister is in town in the Buffalo area from Dallas, so she brought her family up and has been up here for a few weeks. So we've spent a lot of time doing family things with my other sibling who lives in Rochester and his family, and then my father. We played in the Pancreatic Cancer Association of Western New York charity golf tournament in Rochester at Eagle Vale, which is a fantastic event and near and dear to our family's hearts because my mom passed away from pancreatic cancer a few years ago. And John Scott, our good old buddy, who somehow always finds his way into this podcast. He teamed up with my brother, myself, and my dad in a scramble, and we shot 8 under.
That's great.
Finished in a tie for second. Somebody came through and shot 11 under in the scramble.
Okay.
So that was fun. We actually won it a few years ago, the 4 of us, which I've never won a golf scramble in my life.
I've never done it.
It was awesome. It was great. So we thought we had a shot. Played some golf, hung out with the family. I coach my 6-year-old's soccer team, so
Yep.
that's fun. I'm an assistant coach on that team, so yeah, pretty busy.
A lot of golf. I'm a big fan of the British Open because of the time of day.
I didn't watch a second of it, and I hated that because I love golf.
And that was the argument I had with my dad, because selfishly, I normally am up at 2:00 in the morning at the station until noon, and having golf on all morning was just great. And then the weekend came, and my schedule's still all out of whack from working early in the morning, get up and go play hockey on a Saturday, and then just home watching golf the rest of the day because all the leaders are teeing off by the time you got home. But you're right. For the normal person that gets up in the morning, goes and does stuff, and wants to come home on a Sunday and watch the end of the golf tournament, it's over at 2:00 in the afternoon, which is a bummer unless you're me and just sat there watching golf all morning and playing video games on Xbox.
Yeah, a lot of Sundays, especially for the majors, I'll sit and watch, the back half of the final round.
Yeah.
But, we were just busy, and it's earlier, and I was out at a nephew's birthday party, and it didn't happen. So I caught up on some of the highlights, and, you follow along on X and Shoffley doing his thing. But I didn't sit and watch the British, the Open Championship. The British, as we called it when we were kids, is my least favorite of all of them. I don't know. It's just weird watching the links style stuff.
I love the links golf. I love the bad weather.
Yeah.
I love the wind. So, again, selfishly, I'm a big fan. Everyone else I talk to hates it.
I don't hate it. I didn't care to watch it this year. I didn't make it a priority.
Loved it.
Yeah.
I did. What are you watching these days, Andy? I'll go with this. I said this last week to Stevie. Hard Knocks off-season with the Giants. I thought I would hate it. A, hate the Giants. B, hate off-season stuff. However, they put this together, and have you seen it or no?
I've seen clips. I haven't watched full show.
That if you're not into day-to-day NFL stuff, the way they presented the salary cap, the draft, free agency, was perfect for someone who doesn't know the day-to-day stuff that goes on with all that. I mean, they
make it compelling. Each thing is a reason to be interested.
They put it out clear as day as how they're getting to the salary cap. Was the salary cap going up? Where's it going to be?
The Saquon Barkley stuff was fascinating.
The Saquon stuff was amazing. And then you have added to it that Brian Daboll plays a big role in it, and Joe Shane, that half of the first few episodes are almost about as much about the Bills as they are about the Giants with how they put together the Bills roster.
It's funny because I used to really like Hard Knocks, and then it's not that I dislike it now. It just it got disinteresting.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing, and they find the plucky wide receiver or the middle linebacker out of,
Chris Hogan played lacrosse.
Right, and they find one of those guys, and then is he going to get cut? And somebody gets cut, and then is the star player injured or whatever?
Right.
So I kind of lost interest in Hard Knocks a little bit because the story's pretty much the same every time. But you're right, this off-season stuff is a little bit different, which I kind of like because you don't see the behind-the-scenes of the off-season as much. Now, you have more and more because teams do their own – they have their own media production, and the Bills do a fantastic job with their Beyond Blue and Red or their embedded stuff. So you get to see a little bit more of that, but that stuff's fascinating. How do you decide on draft picks? How do you set your board? How do you start free agency? How do you get to the salary cap? So that's cool. That's
they had
different.
them at the combine too, which them commenting on players that they might be drafting.
Right, and then wasn't there a clip where he was like, do you want to trade for somebody, Bean? They asked Bean if he wanted to come up to number 6.
Yep.
Yeah,
that was down
Shane
at the
asked him
Senior
that.
Bowl.
Yeah, so that's cool to see that kind of stuff and how do trades come about and those sorts of things. Because I think people all kind of get how training camp works now because Hard Knocks has been on for so long and
I think one of the clips was Brian Dable said he could run the 40 in 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
Or 7 seconds.
Who's faster, me or Brian Dable? It's got to be.
I'd pay to see it, but
Dave's is faster because he's at least around athletes.
When's the last time you ran a 40?
Like sprint?
Like running after your kids?
Yeah, but I'm never like in a full sprint.
Right.
Like I'm faster than people think I am. But
yeah.
like it's hard for me to get up to that speed without thinking I'm gonna like tear a quad in the middle of it.
That is a good point.
But I'm by no means fast. I'm gonna give it to Dave's, who's been around sports his whole life, and I have not been around sports other than talking about them since 2001.
Yeah, we'll give it to him. Are you watching anything non-football related?
Yeah, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. So House of the Dragon is in its second season, and we just finished up episode 6. I actually a couple of years ago, anticipating knowing the series was coming out, read the book. I have the whole series of the Game of Thrones books, but there was a companion book that dives into this dynasty, the Targaryen dynasty, that they're dragon lords, right?
Okay.
And they rule this kingdom, and it kind of goes through their entire history. And I read that book on vacation in Cape Cod a few years ago, and so I've been anticipating this each time, and it's a really cool, fun series. And I'm not usually into like the mystical
Dungeons and Dragons stuff.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, I really got into Game of Thrones, and now, of course, House of the Dragon follows along with it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Plenty of football on tap, Andy. Our pre-training camp special, Buffalo End Zone special, with the aforementioned Stevie Johnson coming up the night before Bills camp gets underway.
Tuesday, if you're watching this leading into training camp, leading into Tuesday night, Buffalo End Zone training camp kickoff special. Kevin Carroll, Andy Young, Stevie Johnson. We're going to talk about everything that's going on leading into Bills training camp. That's going to be 8 o'clock on Spectrum News 1 in Buffalo and Rochester. And then we'll have camp, and then we'll have podcasts. We'll be back with Buffalo End Zone. I believe we're going to shoot for Friday to kind of get through the first few days of camp.
Yeah, we're full swing, full steam ahead now that football season is upon us.
Do us a favor, too. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is, give us a like, a subscribe, a share. We're really trying to grow this thing and have some fun. We got some big stuff in store this season. Really excited about what we've got going on here. So give us a like, a follow, a subscribe, share it with your friends. Check us out.
Yep. We'll be back at the end of the week. As always, everyone, thanks for joining us.